Uh, Good evening, and welcome to the first of a series of talks focusing on the subject of the Ottoman Hajj. My name is Andrew Peterson. I'm Professor of Islamic Archaeology and Culture at the University of Wales, Trinity St David. And I'd like, first of all, just to say a little bit about this series of events. So tonight's talk is part of a collaborative initiative between myself and Mehmet Krakus, Director of the Yunus Emre Enstitüsü in London, and Miriam Küçük, the Special Events Coordinator, also at the Yunus Emre Enstitüsü. And together we've curated and organised an exhibition and a series of events focusing on the Hajj in the Ottoman period. And as part of this initiative, the Yunus Emre Institute has arranged a series of talks which brings out different issues in the history and material culture of one of the largest and oldest continuously practiced religious events in world history. So this is a really important subject that's being dealt with. And tonight, our first speaker is Professor Richard McGregor from Vanderbilt University in the United States. Now, Professor McGregor's area of expertise is Islam in general, and particularly the medieval intellectual and mystical traditions. He received his PhD from McGill University, and at Vanderbilt he teaches courses on the Quran, interpretation and Sufism, method and theory in the study of religion. So he's eminently qualified to talk about this subject. And he explores religion at the intersections of philosophy, theology, aesthetics and embodiment. And his work has been supported and promoted by numerous prestigious organizations around the world, including the Fulbright, the American Academy of Religion, the American Research Center in Cairo, and the Getty Foundation, just to name a few. And he's published many articles and at least 5 books dealing with different aspects of religious experience in the medieval and Ottoman period. And his latest book, Islam and the Devotional Object, published by Cambridge University Press. In this book, he reconstructs the rich material culture that until recently flourished in the Islamic heartlands. And interestingly, significantly, he takes materiality as inextricable from metaphysics. And in this study, traces the turbulent lives of key religious objects. So based on this, tonight, Professor McGregor will be talking about the Hajj Mahmals, which he'll explain a bit more, Hajj Mahmals of Cairo, which is a fascinating subject that examines the intersection of popular religion with official rituals in the dispatch of the Hajj caravans to Mecca. Okay, thank you, Richard. I should just lastly say that I just would like to remind viewers, people listening to these talks, that at the end of Richard's talk, there'll be a series of questions. So please feel free to leave your questions in the chat box. And if you're listening via social media, you can also make comments, and these will be relayed, and these questions can be addressed to Richard at the end of his talk. Okay, thank you, Richard. I'd now like you to begin. Thank you.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Andrew, for the generous introduction. And I'd just like to say how pleased I am to make contact with and be working with the Yunus Emre Institute. It seems like wonderful outreach. An international web is being spun, and we're all benefiting from it. So this is a terrific service to bring us together. And thank you to Andrew and to Miriam and everyone else who's working hard to put this together. So it should be a terrific lineup of talks. Very good. So I will kick off and share screen. And I think we have it. Very good. Playing at the sacred secular boundary, the Hajj Mahmals of Cairo. The Hajj was not simply something that was done out in the desert wastes of Egypt and Arabia. It did not begin with the departure from Cairo, nor did it end in Mecca by simply reaching the Kaaba. The pilgrimage routes, the Great Mosque, the Black Stone are, of course, essential components. Ground to be crossed, stone to be kissed, prayers to be said, shrine to be decorated. But as the following discussion will endeavor to show, the Hajj also remained very much an urban phenomena in Cairo. Two central objects in the annual urban Hajj parades were the kiswa covering, a large, elaborately inscribed covering destined to hang over the Kaaba, and the mahmal, a special decorated empty palanquin or litter. A few more shots. This empty palanquin or litter, the mahmal, which accompany the kiswa on its journey to Mecca. A new kiswa bearing various Quranic passages was sewn and dispatched every year on the Hajj, while the mahmal made the return journey, and its decoration would normally change only when its royal patron was replaced by his successor. The origins of the practice of covering the Kaaba predate the Islamic period, and the practice, of course, continues today, but its accompanying mahmal has a clearly demarcated start and end point within Islamic history. As we shall see shortly, although mahmals could originate from just about any capital within the Islamic world, in practice, the vast majority came from Cairo. From its first appearance in 1277 to its official demise in 1953, the mahmal tradition was associated largely with Egypt. These objects were the focal point of the Cairo processions, with the mahmal making a striking impression on the vast crowds who would turn out to see and, if possible, touch it. An essential but challenging component of this dramaturgy is the identifying features of the kiswa and mahmal. We shall return to these in detail below, but as a preliminary, it will be noted that these objects display an ambiguity when conceived according to the traditional distinction we make between temporal authority and religion. Arabic historiography and social history has often set this binary in terms of deen, religion, and dawla, dynasty or empire. Interestingly, both are represented in the identifying features of the mahmal and the kiswa. Traditional approaches to Islamic studies fail to register this type of religiosity and these objects because of its deep roots in the local and the historical. The kiswa is inextricable from its immediate context of patronage, and we see here demonstrated at the ends of the Hizam belt. It is always local in the sense that it has a patron donor whose authority over the holy sites is literally inscribed upon the object itself. Thus, all careful treatments of the kiswa will inevitably pull any universalizing descriptions down into the particular. Though the term mahmal can refer to a variety of litters and palanquins, the shape of the Hajj mahmal has been quite consistent. The object is made of two components, a lower section, almost cubic, and an upper section in a tent or pyramid shape. The mahmal sent by Sultan Ghori, who dies in 1516, is preserved in the Topkapi Museum in Istanbul, likely as a trophy of the last Mamluk leader to oppose the Ottomans. Both this mahmal's lower section and upper section are adorned with calligraphic text. The lower and upper sections repeat the Sultan's name. Repeat the Sultan's name with various honorifics, while the horizontal band joining the two on all four sides displays devotional text expressing the pilgrim's desire to see the Kaaba, to be rewarded in this world and the afterlife for completing the pilgrimage, all thanks to the intercession of the Prophet, Bija al-Mustafa in particular. Later mahmals similarly displayed a combination of texts identifying the royal patron along with pious and devotional messages. Al-Ghori's mahmal at the turn of the 16th century was yellow. In accounts from the end of the 17th century, travelers describe mahmals with a black background, which seems to have been common, although we have reports from the middle of the 19th century of red and green mahmals. Fuad the first mahmal in Cairo is a dark red. The inscriptions are both devotional, here we see, and political, temporal. Mahmals were dispatched from several capitals other than Cairo, including Baghdad, Damascus, and in the Ottoman period, of course, Istanbul. Lesser known centers sending mahmals were Yemen and one report from Halab in Syria. Regardless of the wider diplomatic and political realities, the Egyptian mahmal aggressively asserted its superiority over competitors, regardless of origin. Between the 13th and the 15th centuries, on the few occasions the Syrian mahmal was sent to Mecca, it seems to have been humiliated each time by its Egyptian counterpart. Accounts are also preserved of Yemeni officials being beaten and arrested by Egyptian authorities for overstepping the ritual boundaries of mahmal pilgrimage, boundaries that normally required ritual deference to the mahmal from Cairo. Here's a wonderful picture encapsulating some of the tension between the Egyptian and Syrian mahmals, and arms are drawn, bayonets are glistening. In 1807, with the Wahhabis in control of Mecca, the mahmal itself is attacked and burned. Nevertheless, in the following year, another is sent. In the 19th century, shipping and rail travel become the most reliable means of travel in the region. And from this period on, the mahmal is only borne by camel when it parades within urban centers, and as it made its way from Jeddah to Mecca and then to Medina. But for the moment, let's return to Egypt. In the mid-14th century, one visitor reports a procession of judges, jurists, heads of guilds, and officers of the state forming up at the citadel, where they were greeted by the emir of the Hajj designated for that year, and of course, the mahmal. Joined by detachments of soldiers and water carriers on camels, the entire group processes around the city. This procession became a major event in the city's life. In the 15th century, we are told of the great crowds that gathered in front of the citadel to celebrate and take part in the martial games of the Mamluk soldiers, including fireworks, bonfires, and music. Soldiers' displays included mock battles, tossing and catching of lances, and equestrian tricks. They also dressed in frightening costumes, becoming known as the demons of the mahmal, or afarit al-mahmal. They colored their faces, and some wore false beards and teeth. By 1467, after several instances of excess, including abduction of women and boys and looting of shops, these demons were apparently suppressed by royal decree. In the 20th century, the mahmal procession proceeds on a well-organized official itinerary. As during the time of the 15th century demons, the central stage is the large square, Qara Maidan, at the foot of the citadel. Details, including photographs of the various military units, the groups of scholars, government officials, and of course, Sufis, abound. After various rites are performed in the square, the mahmal sets out northwards about 6 kilometers through the densely populated Darb al-Ahmar neighborhood to reach an open ground in the Abbasiyya area. And this is the direction out of the city for pilgrims. After a week or two, the mahmal would usually set out from the train station for Suez, where it would travel by boat to the port of Jeddah. Upon its return from the Hajj, the route would be followed in reverse all the way back to an official ceremony, again at the Citadel Square. Devotional impulses toward the mahmal were also facilitated by setting the object up for viewing in key locations. The Citadel Square had a seat or a platform for the mahmal, and the site for viewing in Abbasiyya was carefully organized. These are wonderful photos showing the fixing of ritual space around the mahmal. And here again, same takeaway. This setting it up for visitation. There, soldiers stood on guard and fabric screens were erected to set the object off, if only temporarily, from the surrounding public space to allow individuals a clear sense of a devotional space. The kiswa would end its Hajj being placed over the Kaaba, while the mahmal continued the pilgrim's circuit, traveling on to the Prophet's tomb in Medina and making the long return trip back to Cairo. As at the Citadel Square and the Abbasiyya site, the mahmal here plays a central role in the rite of the Hajj. The complete history of mahmal parading in the Hejaz has yet to be written, but for the purposes at hand, let me simply note the important interaction it had with the Prophet's tomb in Medina. In response to Wahhabi resistance in Arabia and the rise of conservative Salafi voices within Egypt, the licitness of the Hajj Mahmal came to be challenged. After much debate, and eventually in 1953, the new Egyptian government moved to ban the Mahmal from all public rites. And this was a debate that went on for well over 100 years. But yeah, 1953. So what happened to the image and the object that was the mahmal? We must look in two places, the museum and the rituals associated with local shrines, largely in the provinces. Not surprisingly, perhaps, the mahmal circulates widely within the visual field of popular Egyptian religiosity. This image is a modern Egyptian painting, a wall paint, house painting, showing the entrance into Mecca of the mahmal, followed by a camel train of pilgrims. The mahmal camel is led by a forceful Emir al-Hajj, waving his sword as if to deter any rival mahmals or Wahhabi objections. So stops circulating 1950 and has this ongoing life in the iconography of popular religiosity. So people were drawing these objects without having ever seen them in parades or in public. Although the historical record provides no account of the matter, the identification of the mahmal with the prophet's tomb was well established. This image shows the armed Emir al-Hajj leading the camel, with the title provided above as mahmal of the prophet. This popularly conceived connection with the prophet is further illustrated by a shift in the visual identification of the mahmal. In southern Egypt, mahmals continue to appear in a number of public religious processions. In some cases, these are simply recreations of the departure parades for the Hajj, so long established in the capital, while in other instances, the focus on the Hajj has been redirected towards the tombs of local saintly figures. Certainly the best known of such events is the Mawlid or Mulid of Sidi Abu al-Hajjaj, dies in the mid-13th century, in Luxor. The celebration of the saint's Mulid usually commemorates a birth or a death date. The festivities around Abu al-Hajjaj are highlighted by a large procession. Here, 6 mahmals are circulated, the dressings of which are the coverings of the graves of Abu al-Hajjaj and his 5 sons. The mahmals are preceded by a group of 8 to 10 standard bearers. Vast crowds attend this event, crowding the mahmals for a chance to receive blessing. Until recently, the procession also included colorful carts and decorated boats mounted on wheels. The material culture and history of Islamic Egypt has never been a great concern for colonial Europe. Thus, the Museum of Arab Art, or Dar al-Athar al-Arabiya, emerged rather late and with less support than other museums in Egypt. It was established by Max Hertz in 1884, and its present site is a neo-Mamluk style building on Port Said Street, designed by Alfonso Menoscalo. Although the Museum of Arab Art was funded by Khedive Abbas, and its opening in 1903 was attended by the Mufti of Egypt, Muhammad Abdu, and the Sufi elite of the day, its direction remained largely in the hands of Europeans for the next 50 years. Local criticism of this control of cultural institutions and resistance to the colonial influence on Egyptian art and architecture were deeply held among many and voiced perhaps most famously by Ahmed Zaki and Ali Pasha Mubarak. This cultural resistance would be replaced with political resistance and the nationalization of the Suez Canal in 1951, the Free Officers' Coup in 1952, the founding of an independent Egypt, 1953. The Museum of Arab Art was also nationalized, in that its direction in 1952 was assumed by Egyptians, the first being Zaki Muhammad Hassan, who was replaced shortly after by Muhammad Mustafa. This museum has become the final resting place for the mahmal. I'm arguing not only that the colonial origins of the museum manifested themselves in this process, but that the very procedure for abolishing the mahmal was predicated on a post-colonial Egyptian appropriation of the museum. This colonial institution, orphaned from its original purposes, was appropriated for this task specifically because of its marginal position as an Egyptian, Arab, or Islamic institution. Where do you put a mahmal? Where do you retire a mahmal to? Well, this is the post-colonial Egyptian answer. The history of the mahmal leaves us with a puzzle, one that forces us to challenge our perhaps unexamined assumptions about the secular. Against a Eurocentric theory of social development, the use of the colonial institution of the museum, an ostensibly secular institution by the Salafi and Wahhabi-inspired reformers for the control of religious practice, gives us pause. It seems to run directly against the narrative that would hold the museum up as a display space for a secular national identity. A related but perhaps less clear point is the instrumentalizing of the museum by religious conservatives. We are left to wonder if we understand the institution of the museum fully, if it can be so easily mobilized and appropriated in a post-colonial context by a religious reform project. At least for the moment, the conservative reformers have prevailed, and we stand before a mahmal that will not parade or perform. Its future is as much controlled as its past. The museum has become a place to control the future. Thank you. I will stop sharing. Does that make sense? Very good. Great. So I will just take a look in the chat where you have one question coming in. Is there any mahmal tradition? The question, is there any mahmal tradition being practiced currently in any country with any change, or has it completely died out? I don't know of any contemporary Hajj processions going on today that include mahmals. And one of the interesting observations from this research was this moving outwards of the mahmal as a practice and as an object. It sort of gets refocused, redeployed, and it gets moved out of the official Hajj, well, official and local Hajj displays and processions, and becomes centered, as we saw, around shrines. Right, and of course, just the focus here has been Egypt, but as I was saying, this was 700-year practice. And we have examples. We have the Syrian mahmals, right? We have the Ottoman mahmals. We have historic literary evidence of a scattering of other mahmals. So that wider history is waiting to be, is waiting to be written. So yeah, and I'm excited to hear from folks outside of my backyard, that is outside of the Egyptian reference, which is not the only reference for mahmals and this Hajj culture. So Miriam adds, the mahmal custom was continued under the Ottoman rule, and different mahmals were added to the tradition. What role did it play in different regions? How did they differ? And I have worked on Ottoman mahmals, and I've gone through long efforts at sort of rough typologies of periodizing the development, at least of the design of some of the mahmals. Again, it's the diversity and the creativity of these objects is it far outpaces our ability to put together, simple models of historical development. I mean, there are certainly trends, there are periods, and we can demarcate those. And yes, right. So. But and the tricky one of sort of interesting fold in this is the relationship between Cairo, right, and Istanbul. So after the 16th century, Egypt is that line gets blurred, right? So Egypt has become a province, right, within the Ottoman Empire, and it functions differently. It doesn't stop producing mahmals, but the political map has shifted, and the relationship of Cairo to Istanbul and the rituals around the Hajj, including mahmal access and mahmal priorities, evolve in their next chapter. So that is a whole interesting part of the story to tell. That is mahmals as international diplomacy or political practice and power relations. So thank you, Miriam.
Okay. Apologies, I keep on dropping out for some reason. Just see if there's I just have a question for you while we're waiting for a few others. But you mentioned that the mahmal has a very specific start date and an end date. The end date is
right. Andrew, I'll just fill in the numbers. It's 1277 up to 1953.
Discuss that. 1277, yes.
Yeah. A little bit fuzzy. I mean, it's Mamluk. We certainly know there's a sort of tradition amongst historiographical little fiction that it was a bit earlier, around Shajarat ad-Dur, but we it seems to me to just be a historical fiction. So I mean, ballpark 1270 is, and interestingly, right, at least so far in the sources, I mean, I really drilled down on this to sort of say, who built the very first one in this capacity? And I mean, it's not clear. And strangely, the earliest reports we have just mention these mahmals sort of coming into this Khara Maidan, and people processed, and it was a great day, and the Hajj was a success. And we don't have any of the historians saying today was the first day, or this Hajj season was the first Hajj season that we had monumental mahmals used. We just, and it's striking. I mean, I'm the one with the problem, but I mean, my problem is weren't you shocked? I mean, one year it wasn't there, and then the next year it was there. So we don't have rationale. We don't have, I don't know, fatwa. We don't have anybody sort of marking the emergence of it. Although we can, the dating is pretty clear. And Adnan Siddiqui is asking, was the discontinuation of the mahmal tradition more political?
Just waiting to see if there's any more. Yeah.
Shall I just read off questions? There are a couple.
Yes, yeah, I think so. Yeah, because unfortunately the connection here is slightly unstable.
Right.
Yeah. So actually, I can read it. Yeah. How much does an average mahmal weigh, and was it difficult for the camels to carry? And it says today. This is from Elizabeth Michelle, and today we'd have people moaning about that it's mistreating camels. So
right.
What kind of, was it perhaps more heavy than a traditional camel litter? Is there any idea of this?
Yeah, it was large and it was empty. We have various reports, mostly from Orientalist travelers, who mention cargo, and none of it adds up. So they say, oh well, the most egregious are the ones who say, oh well, the kiswa is inside the Kaaba. Well, the mahmal. Well, that's not possible. It's much too large. Others, reports of things like a Quran or relics. Evliya Shalabi talks about relics, says that there are relics inside them. There are not. I mean, they're just, he's the only one ever to say that. But anyways, so we have nothing inside, and we even have photos of mahmals where the sides have been sort of raised up as it's going through the desert to, I guess, maybe mitigate against the wind or something. And you can literally see through the frame. So it's empty. So it's large, but it's empty. And I found a beautiful little poem to the mahmal camel, which celebrates his bravery and his strength. But these were, the pick of the herd, right? So these were the largest, healthiest camels, and they always, as far as I know, always handled their duties well. And in the modern period, right, there were only where rail and steam were used. The camels did a lot of traveling on rail and steam, beside the mahmal. There was discussion in the 1940s in Egypt about what to do with the mahmal little stable of camels. Well, yeah, that was sort of in the paper, like who are they? There's a nice photograph from the 1940s of one of the keepers giving one of the camels a cigarette. So one of them liked to smoke, but it didn't slow him down, I guess. So yeah, they were impressive creatures, but and intrepid. Right. So in the previous question, Adnan Siddiqui, was the discontinuation of the mahmal tradition more political rather than on religious grounds, or a mixture of both? And yeah, the end of the mahmal is it's very interesting, very convoluted. As I mentioned, it's in the public sphere as a debate for almost 100 years. So roughly, 100 years, people are publicly taking sides about the mahmal, about the parading, about kind of the related related practices. But yeah, the mahmal, right, was debated for a long time. Abdu and others, just sort of everybody seems at some point to have chimed in on the mahmal. And I guess in the aggregate, I mean, there was no simple single crisis. I mean, of course, the early 50s is a pivotal time for Egyptian identity, Egyptian politics, a rising nationalism. I don't know if that explains anything, but you did have a fairly strong, consistent, small chorus of voices objecting to the mahmal culture. And I think as the Salafist voice consolidated in the middle of the 20th century, it just carried more weight in the public sphere and in the political sphere. So there wasn't there wasn't some terrible attack on the mahmal one day and destroying it, but I think it tracks pretty clearly with the rise and the sustained rise of a particular voice of Salafist inspired. Right, and so they are deeply concerned with religion in the public sphere, right? These discussions, right? So how is Islam practiced in a normative way, and that seems to have gotten sort of been the a vein that they opened and sort of rhetorically built on, and yeah, so 1953. Mm-hmm. Great. Well, good. Right, and a parallel to this. Well, I was presenting them as a tandem, right? But is the kiswa, right, and the sending of the kiswa, which is doing many of the things, of course, that the mahmal is doing. It's a projection of power, right? It's a locus for display, for devotional display, for devotional practices, and right, all the politics around the production, the expense, right, and the patronage of the kiswa covering for the Kaaba has this often parallel and often interwoven sort of life story with the mahmal. And maybe I'll just finish this comment out with just pointing to the related practice, which was that of covering not just the Kaaba, so in particular tombs, but covering various sacred spaces and sacred objects, right? Is those histories, right? So coverings for the tomb of Muhammad, right? Coverings for his minbar, covering for the interior of Muhammad's the mosque in Medina, covering for tombs of the prophets, coverings, right, for many sort of venerated spaces and objects, right? This practice of devotional covering is much wider than the simple Hajj culture and the kiswa covering. And those stories, as far as I'm working them out, those stories are quite resonant with how the politics and the devotional culture evolved around the kiswa covering. Many of the same ideas, the same practices, the same sensibilities are just redeployed around other important objects. So we have the parading of coverings for, like I said, objects in spaces having to do with Prophet Muhammad and many other prophetic figures. So woven up, so practiced, conceived of, practiced, and produced in fully resonant ways with kiswa, with the kiswa covering and its related object, the mahmal, right? So how you inscribe them, what you inscribe on them, how you ritually sort of present these coverings, it was all very, it just shows a lot of sort of continuity in practice and in conception. So these are sort of wonderful material histories and aesthetic histories that are interwoven, right, with ritual and devotional sensibilities. Well, good. And if you missed any of the details, the book is out, so you can take a look and see some of this exciting history and some of these details in the first half of my book.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. Unfortunately, Andrew seems to be having some issues with his connection. So thank you very much for joining us. And thank you to Richard for his moderation. And we hope to see everybody next week.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you and take care.